and welcome back. It is now September 25th and it is a nice cool morning out here. We're about 8 degrees here now at 9 o'clock in the morning. So definitely the nights are starting to get a little colder. We haven't really got a killing frost yet, but we have gotten down very close to frost a couple times. Let's take a quick look at this barley here behind me. As you can see, this barley stubble is really greening up. However, it is starting to show the effects of some of the colder nights. You can see we got a little bit of discoloration on the leaf tips, stuff like that. So, I'm expecting this barley is going to be controlled by frost at any time. But right now, there's quite a lot of volunteer. However, not nearly as bad as this time last year. And that is partly just because of how dry we've been. With limited rainfall, we've had limited germination. Although we did get a few small rain showers over this past weekend, so maybe we'll be seeing more barley come up yet this week. Well, the dryland millet has been swathed. You can see we got some pretty nice looking swaths here. All the heads up on the top. There is still the odd head with some green in it here and there, but that should dry down relatively quickly now that these are all exposed and drying down. So I can't wait to see what this yields. I'd love to see more of this. So some of those millet heads were definitely a little riper than others when it was swathed, and you can see they have kind of thrashed out on the ground here. Whether that was from wind before swathing or just from the physical activity of swathing, you can see there's quite a few seeds on the ground here. So if these are all to germinate in the spring next year, we might have a pretty good stand of millet in here again. Still lots of standing oats that are going to get silaged here in the next week or so. These oats still look fairly green, but around the edges of the field you can really see some spots where we're starting to hit dough stage. Most of these inside the field are still kind of like late milk. They are rapidly starting to firm up. And with the weather starting to close in on us and some cooler nights, we'll probably get these swathed here pretty soon, probably even this week, and get silage done a few days after that. Here we got some pretty nice looking winter wheat out by Picture Butte. This was seeded a couple weeks ago. It is now in 2-leaf stage and looking pretty good. As far as weeds go, there's not a whole lot. There is the odd weed here and there that is recovering from tillage as well as a burn off, like this roundleaf mallow here, but you can see this guy's really struggling. He's really not going to amount to anything at all. There is also some volunteer wheat in here, as well as a little bit of wild oats and quackgrass, but really they're not going to have a chance to be a competitive issue with this field before we get a frost. Here's a stubborn late canola field. You can see we got some patches of green plants in here. They're kind of all throughout, kind of scattered in the canopy, as well as some patches of weeds. There's some big pigweeds, lamb's quarters and stuff in here, as well as some green canola plants that are caused by some aster yellows. You can see some of that right over in here. So this field is basically not drying down enough at this time yet to be straight cut. I mean, a lot of it is, but there's enough green in there that it's still a problem. And we are well past that swathing point now. So our only real options in a field like this now is to come in and hit this with something like Regulone and hope that we still have enough heat and sun during the week to help that dry down. Or we just have to be patient and wait. But waiting in this field, judging by how green some of these plants are, could still be about 2 weeks before harvest. So we'll probably hit this with some Regulone. This late field of canola was extremely drought stressed this season and had multiple stages of growth. When we started to get rain a couple of weeks ago, it started to reflower and was going to try to set new pods. So we came in here with glyphosate and heat, and we sprayed it about 3 weeks ago now. I believe it's about 20 days. So right now you can see that we were successful in stopping it from flowering and trying to set new pods. So that should reduce the amount of green pods and stuff like that in the sample. But we weren't all that terribly successful in actually burning off all these green leaves. Some plants more so than others. You can see this one, we've burned off a lot of those green leaves, but it's still just continuing to grow and put out more. So we weren't all that successful in getting actual plant mortality with that glyphosate and heat, which I would have liked to have seen. Overall, weed control was not too bad. We did a pretty decent job burning down the kochia and foxtail and downy brome in the field, but the canola itself, not quite so much. Well, here's something I don't find every day in fields. I got some puffball mushrooms here. You can see these guys nice and white. They're kind of still in like late vegetative stage basically. This one here has blown up to release its spores, so that's kind of interesting to see. These guys are perfectly harmless. They are actually edible if you get them, if they're still pure white inside. These ones I can tell by the feel, they're quite leathery, so they are mature. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, you can see this one is pretty mature. It's just right on the verge of blowing up itself. So definitely not edible. Completely harmless in the field though. Definitely not really a weed. I don't think it's necessarily beneficial fungus either, but it's harmless at the least. Well, it's that time of the year again. We need to start talking about soil active fungicides for fall application. So the soil active herbicides would be herbicides that basically have long residual activity in the soil. Typically we're going to use them ahead of crops like wheat or pulses, specifically peas and lentils generally. So products group 14, 15, so things like Fierce, Authority, Focus, Volterra, all of those can be safely applied in the fall. However, what we want to be watching is soil temperature. Ideally, we want to wait until the soil temperature is kind of consistently below 10 degrees. That will kind of limit fall activity of those herbicides to maximize the residual in the spring. Also, especially with some products like Authority, which can take a fair bit of moisture to activate, we don't always consistently get that in the spring, as we found out the last few years. So by applying it in the fall, we can allow that snow melt during the winter. I mean, it's guaranteed it's going to snow at least once during the winter. We can get that activation and get that product basically to work right off the bat in the spring, and then be able to seed peas into a clean field. Now, there's still some cornfields that are hanging on to their moisture. This field here was tested at about 68 to 70% moisture, so still a little bit green for going into the silage pit. Ideally, we want to wait for 65, 66. See, these ears are really nice and mature. This is a Pioneer hybrid style corn, so you can see it is dent corn, and it's pretty mature. There's very, very little for moisture left in these kernels here. You can just see how much these are drying down, but the stalks themselves are still quite green and really holding on to the moisture. So a few more days and the rest of this can come down. When I see something like this in a field, sometimes it makes me a little concerned. When you see a heavy concentration of seagulls or crows or magpies in a field, quite often that can mean that we have a problem with something like cutworms, which I'm gonna go check out in these patches where all these seagulls are taking off from here now. Well, here where the seagulls were hanging out, you can see we've got a couple spots here where the seed row is basically, trampled. This is fall rye with a heavy population of volunteer barley. So you can see they've kind of packed the area down here where they've been bedding down, but I'm not really seeing any signs of feeding or where they were digging or anything like that. I'm also not seeing any areas where we have, a bunch of feeding from cutworms. There should be plants cut off kind of thing, or wire worms where you'd see plants yellowing and dying. I'm not seeing any of that right now, so I think they were probably just using this as an area to bed down. I will be offering another production run on my seed row tools here at some point this winter through AgroPlus. So beauty of these tools, they're sharpened on two sides, this side and this. So you can use it for scraping away in your seed row to expose seed, or I like to use that other edge as kind of a weeder. You can get underneath, pull up, cut underneath the roots so you can pull up the root mass and take a look at these young seedlings. So keep your eyes open for these. They might be offered in carbon and stainless steel with various handle materials as well. This is a G10 Ultrex. Today I'm out by Granham doing a Canadian Food Bank's harvest, so a little bit later than some of the other ones in the area. This one is irrigated durum, looking like a pretty good crop so far. Sounds like it's grading number 1. So eventually I'll get that video edited together and you'll see a video on there including what the yield and harvest total and everything like that was. Everybody is scattering to their machines. We got 5 combines here in total, running from the old antique here to couple more John Deeres. Got a nice grain cart there, 1 case, another John Deere, and 1 Claas Lexion. It is a beautiful Friday morning out here. We got some nice sun, although it is still a little cool here this morning. It looks like the weather forecast for this weekend is going to be quite a bit of rain tomorrow potentially, although I don't know if I believe it until it's going to happen. But I guess we'll find out, and maybe I'll see you next week.